It was a normal Friday night. We'd put the kids to bed. We'd sat down. We'd had a takeaway. We'd sat down ready to have a couple of glasses of wine. And then he said, "I need to tell you something."
Welcome to Girl Talk with Jenny Raven. Episode 7, Harry, Harriet and Anna. So welcome to this podcast with me, Jenny Raven. I'm thrilled to have Anna with me in the studio. We've only known each other via email and it's just a delight to see each other. Anna, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. And thank you for having me on. Excited.
I'm excited too because you're one of those extraordinarily rare creatures, which is a partner, a woman who has embraced her partner's feminine side. And that's what we're really going to deep dive into today, about your journey and how best you might advise other partners who may be on the journey of discovery with their own partner, discovering that they're a cross-dresser and having a reaction to it. So let's just start right in the beginning, Dim. Do you want to describe your life before the revelation? Let's call it the revelation, the moment where, the truth was spoken.
Yeah, absolutely. So me and Harry are just your bog standard couple, really. We met when we were quite young. We both worked normal jobs. We had a couple of kids. We live in quite a small sort of town in the north of England, Yorkshire area. So yeah, we were just sort of a normal couple and just lived a happy life and were just sort of getting on with it. I've always been quite an open person. I've always been a big supporter of the LGBTQ community. I think from the previous jobs and things that I've done, I've worked with people from all over the world, from all different backgrounds. So yeah, I've been quite an open person. I think we come from an area where it's probably not as things are not as accepted generally because we're in a small town as opposed to a big city. So yeah, I think we are a little bit sort of behind where we are, but because I went away to university in a city and things like that, I've always sort of been more open to things. So yeah, we were just your bog standard professional couple with a couple of kids and just making it through life, and that was that really.
Right. I mean, I think there's something there to, really highlight that I currently live in London, but like you, I'm from the north of England. And I grew up in a time and in the town where, cross-dressing, even being gay was almost a slur. Certainly in my youth, it was, before the big gay revolution. And my experience is that most people are generally very kind, but there's often some surprise, and sometimes opinions bubble to the top. We'll get into those in a moment. But one of the core questions I wanted to ask you about, I suppose, about yourself and Harry, is it a kink or is it an identity? And I just want to make a distinction that, I don't think that those are binary questions. But my feeling is that, you're either at one end or on the spectrum of somewhere in between. And where do you think, your relationship lies in relation to kink or identity?
Yeah, so I think, we've talked about this a lot as a couple. And I would say that Harry it is more, it's on the spectrum, but it's more towards the kink side. Although he does recognise and will say that there is part of his identity that he does, feel is more on the feminine side. So although it's on a spectrum, and we do sort of lead more towards the kink side, he also does like getting dressed up and having that feminine side without the kink as well.
Yeah, I think that's extraordinarily normal, certainly within our community. And I have a strong sense that there are more of us than the statistics or people would like to admit. And certainly even more who think about it and desperately wish that they could explore that part of who they are. So let's talk about the day, the night, the moment that Harry dropped the bombshell.
Yeah, so it was about 8 years into our marriage. It was a normal Friday night. We'd put the kids to bed. We'd sat down. We'd had a takeaway. We'd sat down ready to have a couple of glasses of wine with the TV on. Everything was normal. Nothing sort of prepared me for there being anything different to a normal Friday night. And then he said, I need to tell you something. And just those words absolutely threw me. I really thought that it was going to be something sort of horrific. I thought, oh gosh, he's having an affair. He's been cheating on me. He's leaving. He's seriously ill. I went into sort of overdrive, catastrophizing really of what was going to come next. And I think I actually maybe said, "Are you cheating on me?" I think I actually said that to him. And then obviously he just said, I like dressing as a woman. I like wearing women's underwear, women's clothing. I like it. I like the way it makes me feel. And I laughed because I thought he was joking, and it was a bit of relief actually that he wasn't dying or he wasn't having an affair. And then I quickly realised that he wasn't joking, and actually the enormity of what he just said. And I was shell shocked really. I didn't really know how do you respond to that? What are you supposed to say to that? So it sort of took a few minutes to kind of sink in to what I was actually hearing. And then it was just bombardment of questions from me. Obviously, the normal ones that we have seen so many partners sort of ask about on different social media platforms, reaching out for that help. Is he trans? Is he gay? Does he want to live as a woman full time? And, what does it mean? What does it mean? Because cross-dressing, as we've found out, is on a massive spectrum. Some people live their lives sort of more fluid. So, they live as a man and some days they dress as a woman, and that's sort of out in the open. It was just so confusing, and I had no idea as to what that was going to look like. I'm not particularly proud of my reaction. When I look back now, I think it's completely warranted and normal for anyone in that situation to kind of react the way that I did. But knowing what I know now, yeah, I'm not, I don't feel great about how I reacted because I very much did push him away and I wasn't particularly very kind at the time. But I think that was more about going into, a bit of self-protection, a bit of defense mechanism, if I push you away, this can't hurt, sort of feeling. So yeah, it was a really tough time those following weeks after the revelation, if you like, and and the months following, there was lots of soul searching, lots of deep conversations late into the night, lots of reading, trying to find information out. It was really tough for quite some time, but we got through it and we are so much stronger for it.
I did a podcast with Emily Letts, who's a therapeutic kink practitioner, a few months back, and we talked about this very issue, and I think she really kind of deconstructed it brilliantly, in so much as her take on it is that we obviously live within a system that we'll call the patriarchy, and within that system, we inherit a role, we embrace a role, we play a role, and it's very binary, male or female from birth. And when you fall in love with somebody, when you decide to build a life with somebody, and you have an understanding of what their role is, even if the role is a mask, and I think this is the critical part, when they finally reveal and take the mask off, it's a shock, because what's beneath the mask is not necessarily in alignment with what they thought they were signing up for. And I think it's really important to understand, for anybody going through it, that it's completely appropriate and, as you said, completely normal to have that shock reaction. But then the soul searching has to come and making a decision. And I always remember that, we are on a journey as a couple, as you're in a relationship, and everybody changes and everybody has revelations. There's always something in the closet, something hopefully not very much, not very big. And if you can embrace your partner's skeletons, if we want to call it that, I don't think it's necessarily the best way to cook them and describe it, but you said, your relationship is stronger for that. So in the aftermath of the revelation, as ye became more comfortable with what this might mean. How did Harry change? Did he go on a massive, I'm gonna guess it, did he go on a massive spending spree and like completely max out his wardrobe?
He did, yeah. I mean, for some time before it was sort of agreed that it was, yeah, this is okay, this is going to be part of our lives. I'm accepting, I'm choosing to stay. There was lots of, lots of what's this going to look like. We'd sort of set some boundaries about things that I was sort of open to exploring maybe in the future, but just not right at that moment. I didn't feel I was in the place to be able to do that. It's really interesting what you just said about the patriarchy as well, because I am a feminist. Not an extreme feminist, but a feminist nonetheless. I've always been a big believer in everybody being able to live their authentic self, and if it's not hurting anybody, does it matter what gender, what colour skin we've got, what's our sexual orientation? Which is why now, when I do reflect back, it is really difficult to feel that was my reaction. But again, I do think, yeah, you have this feeling that your partner is one thing, and then they tell you this. And what I actually thought would happen is that Harry was a different person because he told me that. So it was like taking that mask off. That must mean he's someone different. Not only has he, deceived me, which is how it felt at the beginning because he hadn't told me and sort of given me that choice, but he was going to be a different person. And actually, when he took the mask off, he wasn't. He was just Harry, but just with this different side. And I think that was what was quite sort of surprising throughout this. But yeah, once we'd decided this is what it's going to look like, we're going to move forward, he did go on a spending spree and he went all guns blazing. I had to, in the end, to say, whoa, let's just put the brakes on a little bit. We've gone from, let's see how this goes, to wanting to dress all the time, wanting to buy all these things. But then, as I've mentioned in some of my social media posts and things, he's never shared it with anybody. You've never told anyone. He'd kept it, hidden for all those years. As I think most cross-dressers will say, that this is something that tends to sort of start, at least the sort of thoughts around it, in childhood. So, he's gone from that to being a teenager, to being in his early 20s. And he's kept that with him without telling a soul, other than maybe some people anonymously on Reddit and things like that. So he was excited. I'd opened the floodgates, essentially. I'd said, yeah, it's fine.
It must have been a fabulous feeling for him to finally know that he can share this side of him with the person he's probably closest to in the world. And something you just said that made me realise it's because I'm this, my partner knows, and we can get into my journey if you feel that's relevant. But what you're really describing is Harry doesn't change. There's just more of Harry. There's another dimension to Harry. There's another side to Harry.
Exactly, yeah. And I'd be interested to sort of hear what your partner thinks as well. But that's exactly it. And I have joked a few times recently about, I'm getting the best of both worlds. I've got my husband. He spends a lot of time in his male form. Equally, he spends time in his female form, and is the best of both worlds. But I also think as well, what I think's been really interesting, and it's sort of, as I've reflected, he has always been, a really kind person, a really soft, gentle person, as well as having that masculine side. So I do think potentially, there's maybe that element to it as well, but there has always been that feminine side there. But I just obviously didn't realise what it was. I just thought, he's a lovely guy. I'm very lucky. And actually, that's not changed. I still have him. I still have my husband, who is a lovely guy, who is, still soft and gentle and kind. But then also we have this other side where, he likes to dress as Harriet. That's his fem name. And yeah, I'm lucky that we've got such a diverse sort of relationship where we can have either. I can have either.
Right.
So yeah, I don't know how your partner sort of thinks about it.
So my journey, much like Harry, to become Harriet, at a very, very early age, I knew there was something about being a girl, being feminine, that was enchanting. and I wanted it, and I knew it was forbidden, and I've had a number of bad experiences, probably at 5 or 6 years old, when very innocently I would say something. I don't particularly remember anything, but I do know it got shut down. And it was only when I hit puberty and I became sexually capable, and then suddenly that was an overwhelming, roaring fire inside me that had to be fed. And again, I had some very, very private fun on my own, and then that got discovered, and then that was deeply and profoundly shamed, and I went back in the closet. And then I had a number of relationships, and in all of those relationships, at some point, I would fess up, and the reactions were varied. Nobody was ever particularly unpleasant, and certainly didn't kill any relationship. Although, whether he was allowed to come out and play, very rarely. And, more as a kind of like, well, okay, I suppose as it's Halloween, maybe he can. And it was very, very reluctant. And then in my 30s, I met my current partner. And I'd done a life skills course at that point, and I was very high on the life skills. But I suppose you'd call it radical honesty. And 4 weeks into the relationship, I was like, okay, we have to talk about this thing, because this is going to be a big part of our relationship. And because she was in the right mindset to discover our relationship. Unlike, I suppose to some degree your journey, it wasn't 8 years in of looking at the mask. She was 4 weeks in looking at the mask. So when I dropped the bombshell, it wasn't a betrayal. It was still a surprise, but it didn't land like a betrayal. So it took her about 10 seconds to adjust. And then she smiled and said, okay, let's open your Pandora's box. And in the moment, we quite literally opened it all up and never looked back. And pretty much since then, it like Harriet, I went on a mad spending spree, because I'm like, I could now do this without, having to be hidden. The internet was exploding, so if you get anything on Amazon, and I probably spent way too much money. But we had a lot of fun, and then it became kind of like normalized to the point where Jenny, who's inside me, got a bit, it wasn't convenient, and I wasn't driven. And it was only later in life, during the pandemic, that Jenny's always been there, but she resurfaced during the pandemic, because she was in as much of lockdown as I was in my masculine form, but she was more vocal about, like, I want to come out. And that's when I started writing the books as a way to allow Jenny to vent herself without having to deal with it in front of our new and very young family. Because that would never have, we had a son at that point, so it would never have really worked. It's been remarkably bump free since I kind of fessed up to the world. I mean, it does lead me into the next series of questions for you. Let's get a little bit intimate now, but how did it transform fun and games in the bedroom for you?
Yeah, so I mean, I was open to that quite early on after the revelation, As I said before, I'm quite an open person, and although, we would probably have said that we were more of a vanilla type couple, historically, there has been certain things in our relationship in the bedroom that has sort of been more on the kink side. So yeah, I was open to trying anything. Again, after Harry's big spending spree, he had lots of things he wanted to show me. And one of the first times he dressed in front of me, he will openly admit it wasn't great. He didn't look the best. I think he'd thrown on about 7 different layers because he was so excited that he could get to try all these things all at once. And it was a bit like, what are you doing? Come on, let's sort this out. Which actually has been quite fun, because I've been able to sort of say, oh, actually that goes really well together. And if you wear that with that looks really good. So we still in the bedroom, we have our normal vanilla relationship where I'm me and he's him. And then we have our relationship where it's Harriet and Anna. And Yeah, it's been eye-opening for me because I've always identified as a cis woman, heterosexual. That's been me. I've never sort of gone through my life sort of having that questioning that some people do. So here I am, with my husband who likes to dress as a woman, wants to bring that into the bedroom, and I enjoy it. So what does that make me? And that was really difficult. It was really confusing actually because I'm not really sure there is a name for it, and I did a lot of soul searching around that as well on my own identity. And I can recognize an attractive woman, an attractive man dressed as a woman. Um, and I think I just decided along the way I was going to stop trying to put labels on it or trying to fit myself into a box. I'm attracted to my husband, and I'm attracted to my husband when he's Harriet, and that's just where we are. So yeah, it's we don't sort of have a specified day and time where we say, right, today we're gonna we're gonna be, Harriet and Anna, and then the next day we're gonna be Harry and Anna. But yeah, we do find the sort of right balance of when in the bedroom that's just us as a couple, or that's us as a couple of cross dressing involved, really.
I think that's a really healthy way to look at it. And, I understand the need for labels in a society because we need to be able to describe things, to reduce things. And I don't really want to call people things, but, our brain can't cope with too much information. So we inevitably reduce people down to a label, tall, short, from the north, whatever that label is. And, the LGBTQ plus, spectrum is just another series of labels. But ultimately, when you get to know the person, particularly if you get to know them intimately, I think those labels start to not be helpful because they start, Eddie Izzard, I've spoken about this, many times now. Susie Izzard, who doesn't really care whether you call him she, her, him, her, and I'm very much with Susie Eddie on that. He is a great quote from a show, which is, "They're not women's clothes, they're my clothes." And, Harry isn't Harriet or Harry, he's your partner. And it's all good. I suppose that maybe that's one of the messages I'm, because I'm writing Jenny's writing a biography of Jenny's experiences, and part of it is to help partners who are on their own journey of discovering that their husband or their lover or their partner has been secretly doing this for some time, and what on earth should I do about it? And part of the message is, well, as you stated at the beginning, Harry's still Harry. It's also Harriet, which is, extra. So embrace it, because this is more to have fun. It doesn't mean you have to go there every single night or all day, every day, but it's not that big a deal. And I'm assuming things have settled down a little bit and you've got into your routine now. But does Harriet go out with you as Harriet, or is Harriet but staying at home?
A bit of both, really. We tend to, if we go out together, that is more away from home. That is a decision we took. Again, with the fact that we've got children, teenage children now, and I think that we made that decision to keep that separate. But yeah, we do go out together away from sort of home. But mainly it is more sort of a private at home thing that we do together. But yeah, I do think what you've just said is really interesting, because, I think when your partner tells you that they dress, there's two sides to it. There's usually the feelings of either surprise or upset because you feel betrayed or deceived. But then there's the cross-dressing thing. And when I look back, I think my reaction was more about how I'd been deceived and not being given the choice. And when I looked at the cross-dressing side of things, yeah, I think there was my own lack of knowledge and, misconceptions around it. But I think for me, what I've found on this journey, the biggest thing I've found is I think I was feeling a certain way about it because society told me that's how I should feel about it. It's not something that is okay in a heterosexual relationship. That for me what rings around in the head when I think about it. And it wasn't until, we went on this journey and we started Crossdressed UK. Although we've not been going very long, the lead up to that has been a long time, lots of research and things that actually it's only sort of modern society where what we wear has been male or female. In years gone by, everyone wore a dress. That's all that was available, Everyone wore robes, dresses. It was acceptable. There wasn't these labels until society decided there needed to be. So yeah, I do think when I separated the two, one was like, is it the cross-dressing that's an issue for me? And if so, why? And it wasn't. It wasn't an issue. It kind of felt like it should be an issue because that's what society tells us is normal and acceptable and what isn't. I think once I took that side away and was like, how do I really feel about it? If I ignore society, if I ignore what other people might think about this, how do I feel about it? And actually, I didn't feel any kind of way. It was just like, this is it. He likes wearing women's clothes. Is that a problem? No, it's not. And I think it was as simple as that, really, when you strip everything else back. But I think, yeah, a lot of the issue comes from either misconceptions or how they've kept it from their partner. And I know that is really difficult to deal with. But also having spoken with lots of other cross-dressers and having to speaking with Harry for such, in depth for so many years about it, I do get it. It's a huge thing if you've never shared it with anybody, or even if you have to be prepared to lose that person that you love potentially when you are telling them. And I think that's a really difficult decision to make. So as much as I really struggled with that in the beginning, that it had been kept from me, I do think that now, having sort of learnt more about it, I can absolutely see why that's the case. So I think it's really important if people are learning that their partner is a crossdresser, that they've just come out to them about it, to try and differentiate between how you're feeling about what is it that sort of, is it the cross-dressing that's the issue? Is it the fact that you feel like you've been lied to? And try and separate the two, because I think sometimes when you are in that big ball of emotion and trying to sort of make sense of it all, it's easy to think that the cross-dressing is a negative, and quite often it's not. And I think sometimes that's where things tend to go wrong. And it sort of feels like it's the cross-dressing that's the issue, but it tends to be more along the lines of the not being told.
Yeah, no, I resonate with that because, as I said at the beginning, I always find it's very helpful to put yourself into somebody else's shoes, and if it's a cross-dresser, that's usually 6-inch platform red ones. But if you go back to, I don't know Harry well enough to speak of his childhood, but I was deeply and profoundly shamed at age 5. I was deeply and profoundly shamed at 12, 13, and that was linked with, something that was very powerfully sexual for me. So, and then, there were more bad experiences as I grew. So my entire experience of it was, you are a freak, you are wrong, you are broken, you are weird. It was a close friend and she just smiled and looked at me and said, "No, you're queer, darling. That's all who you are. You're just queer." I was like, "Oh my God, what does that mean?" And then we had a conversation about it, and it's such an all-embracing word of just like, you're just not heteronormative. Along with probably 99% of the planet, if they were honest enough inside themselves to say, yes, I have thought about it, yet I've maybe not acted on it, but I'm not, of course, at each end of the spectrum, there's your alpha males and your alpha females who are like dominantly in that role, but they've got to be a tiny percentage of the planet, and the rest of us are on this giant spectrum. And I think, what you said about like separating the deceit from the revelation, I think if you can really repackage or reframe the deceit as, this person has done this in order to survive in the world. This isn't something they've hidden because it's convenient. This is quite literally survival. And if their only experience is shame, guilt, terror, horror of it. And yet it's this thing that they need to do as well. Is it any wonder, that they were in your instance, they wait 8 years to, make the revelation. In my instance, I was lucky because I just come out of a course and I was really fully embracing, let's get radically honest about everything. And so I went steamrollering into it with a big grin on my face. So I guess the message, really, if there is a message for, those partners who may be listening to this, trying to understand why now with their husbands. And there's another really interesting thing, and I'd love to get your take on it. But, how amazing is it that Harriet decided to tell her truth to Anna and didn't decide to not tell her? That says to me that Anna must be an extraordinary human being who's capable of handling this kind of challenge in their relationship. So it just tells me that you have a strong relationship, even though it's a massive need for Harriet to share it. But it also tells me that you, Anna, are, you're capable of handling it, which makes you strong and amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, I think Harry saw that in me. I think he thought, this was something. He went into it, hoping for the best, planning for the worst. I think he sort of hoped and thought that I would be accepting in some way. We know there are a lot of partners out there who they partially accept it, as in they know that it's happening, but they don't want to be a part of it. So they almost compartmentalize it and put it there. This is our life. This is what we do on a regular basis. I know you do that. I don't want to be involved in it. And I could have done that as well. But again, I was open to, to sort of what it would look like and just, seeing where things went. And I think for me, you are absolutely right. When having spoken to Harry on numerous occasions in depth about sort of what it felt like, I think it is around that survival and that truly not being able to be yourself. And there was part of me that then felt sad that he didn't feel like he could share that with me for so long, not from a selfish point of view, but that he didn't have that sort of, he didn't feel safe enough to do that. But again, I absolutely get why. And I think you're right. It is turning that notion of this is deceit, this is, betrayal, into actually this is what I've had to do my whole life to get by, to keep it hidden, because if I don't, something bad's going to happen. And very much like you, Harry hasn't had the same sort of traumatic experiences with it that it sounds like you have. But he has definitely felt that shame, the feelings of being weird, freak, everything else that goes with that. And when you look into it, is it any different from any other kink, or is it any different from being interested in any other sort of hobby, or is it any different from, a girl being a tomboy? I know it's on a spectrum, but what is the big deal when you break it down? And I absolutely get it. It's not for everybody, sorry. And that's what I always say when I speak to both CDs and to partners, that there's no right or wrong way to navigate it as a couple. Some people can and want to be involved in it, and some people can't, and that's okay. That's okay. I think what if I could give any advice to probably firstly to crossdressers would be, if you are deciding to tell your partner, to really understand the fact that this is probably not something she ever imagined she'd be hearing or would be dealing with. So whatever her reaction may be, that is valid in that moment. It might not feel nice, but that is her truth at that time. But if I had to give advice to partners, it would be, I know it hurts and it feels deceitful, but it's not about you. It's not about how they've wanted to keep it from you. It's about keeping themselves safe. And it's going to take some time to sort of even get your head around it, but really go away and think about, is it the big deal you maybe feel it is at the time? And if it is, why is that? Is it because society's told us it needs to be a big deal Do you genuinely feel that? Because I think it's really hard when it feels all consuming, but when you actually break it down, that's when I think you can truly make a decision, an informed decision, really, about whether this is for you, whether you want to be part of it, whether you're happy to continue your relationship but keep that separate. But I think you have to have the information and that full understanding to be able to make a decision about it.
I always feel very strongly that of all kinks to reveal, cross-dressing is one of the most benign, and also, if you do it well, funny. Like, it's funny and hilarious and playful, and it's more akin to, kinky cosplay than it is to, I don't know how I would cope with, somebody, my partner suddenly describing that they wanted to go, get deeply into BDSM and would like me to tie them up or beat them, or, I don't know how I relate to that. So I understand it, but I don't think it's quite on the same scale as that. Maybe that's just my, my personal opinion getting in the way. I mean, can I ask when the revelation happened, and as life carried on and inevitably life opened up in that direction, even to the point where you've now got a website and a community around that, did your friendship group change, and did old friends die away? Did you tell people? Did you tell family, neighbours? Is it still very much, pardon the pun, a closeted secret, or is it out in the open in any way, shape or form, and how have people reacted?
Yeah, so we have a few friends that know. Our families don't know, and that is more Harry's decision than mine. I'm not bothered either way. I'm quite happy if our families knew, but Harry wants to keep that side of him separate, purely and simply again because of I think the unfair judgment that he would probably receive. And again, I think that comes from the generation his family are in, and where we live as well. I think we are, like I said before, sort of not as accepting of things as maybe some of the bigger cities and other areas in the country. But the friends that do know, yeah, we've not changed. That's not changed our relationship, our friendship with them, and they've actually not really been bothered. It's been like, oh, okay. So we've been really lucky there. However, I do think there are people in our lives who, if they were to know, that would probably change.
That's a shame, isn't it?
Mm.
Again, going back all the way to the beginning of my current relationship, and part of this course that I'd gone on, I had a massive revelation that in almost all instances and almost all revelations in life, people will have a reaction that follows. You're at the dinner table and you say, "Does this thing?" and then you tell them and they go, "Goodness me, gosh, shock, tell me something about it." You tell them something about it and they go, "Could you pass the salt, please?" And that's it. It's like, it's done. Like, and it's just, everybody seems to be so self-obsessed with their own drama and lives that, sure, your drama in life is titillating for a moment, but let's not get in the way of my drama being what's the most important
Yeah.
thing, not your drama. And so people will just accept more often than not. They'll just go, "Oh, okay," and that's been my overwhelming experience. I agree with Harry. Like, I never, my mum didn't handle it well, and I don't know whether she told my dad, and I never kind of confronted it with either of them, and I don't think if I had, there would have been anything that would have good come out of that. Same with my brother. I don't think anything good would come out of that revelation, although I suppose in my heart I think he'd probably go, "Oh, okay, interesting," and then just get on with his life. My partner's parents absolutely would not, they wouldn't be able to, they're just too conservative.
Mm-hmm.
And it wouldn't work. So there is that, but in my wider life, I work in the creative industries and events as well, and I'm close to making the decision to pull the pin out of the hand grenade and go, okay, it's time to blow this up, and to effectively get on stage as Jenny and shock the world for about 15 seconds, after which nobody will be interested by 15 seconds of fame in high heels, and begin a new journey, fully embracing Jenny. And I think the key for me is to, be inspired by Eddie Izzard, Susie Izzard, which is the full integration of I'm a bit like this sometimes, I'm a bit like that sometimes, but all of it is me, and
Yeah.
none of it is wrong. And sometimes I'm more playful, and I just want to really, really embrace that part of my life, because one of the things I talked to Trish on a previous podcast, who she helps crossdressers have full experiences, and she's an amazing person. But one of the things we discussed was, as I'm getting older, I think there's two crossroads that cause, let's say, Gen X, boomers, and to some degree elder millennials at this stage in their lives to kind of start confronting it. Is one, you can see the end of the tunnel. You've lost friends, and you become much more present to your own mortality. But also just on a chemical level, we may just have that bit less testosterone going through our body, that the feminine part of us is less kind of locked down and just keeps coming back and saying, hello, can I come out to play? I wake up as Jenny and I go to sleep as Jenny, and I spend an inordinate amount of the day thinking through Jenny's brain, like much more than almost, I don't even think my partner understands just how present Jenny is for me. And that's more a more recent revelation, or, certainly pandemic-ish, around that time. I mean, a little bit before the pandemic as well. So it does, to me, point to, I do think the testosterone thing may have an aspect to it as well, and that feeling of like, it's time to do this now, because, I don't have infinite years in front of me that you feel like you have when you're 27. So yeah, I've I've talked myself out. Let's dive into the next part of the conversation, which we've really tapped into quite a lot. And talking now, one of the things that I did when I started writing as Jenny is I built a website, and it was Ruby, who's from the books, who challenged me to write a biography of Jenny, and Jenny, of course, said yes, absolutely. And as I was writing it, I suddenly became aware that I was really only aware of my own very narrow niche of experience. So I ran a couple of surveys, and they were targeted at crossdressers, not trans women, not sissies, or all the the different, how you could kind of, again, categorize people, which I'm not a big fan of. But it kind of used the word cross-dressing in the title, so it attracted people who perceive themselves as cross-dressers. And I've run two of these surveys now, and one of the things that really came out that was really quite significant in the data was the amount of people who were unhappy and felt trapped in a relationship, and felt the only way out was to press the nuclear button, and kind of like explode and say, this is me, and come hell or high water, it would either end it, or it would, distort it into something that they didn't really want, or they would leave under the pretense, as Trish said in the previous podcast, some of us would rather say I'm having an affair than please don't look in that case in the boot and find some size 11 heels, and figure out that those are for me. And I just wanted your take. I know we've touched on this, but let's open our hearts and experience to the women who are discovering that their partner has a secret feminine side and they're confronting it now. What would you say to them?
It's a really difficult one, because I've got the experience myself firsthand. But then I've also obviously since then spoke at length with Harry about it, and then with other crossdressers and other crossdressers' partners. It's a really difficult one, and I absolutely, think everybody should be free to live their true authentic self. I think what you're going too with the data in the surveys that you did probably is very similar to how Harry was when he told me. He was probably, well, he was unhappy because he didn't want to keep it a secret anymore. He wanted to let Harriet out, very similar to how you've, explained with Jenny. And I think, that is a big thing. Very interesting. I listened to the podcast with Trish, and I would again say, you have to be prepared to lose that person if you're going to tell them, because unfortunately that is sadly the case in some relationships. But I think, for those that are feel that it's time to be them true selves and reveal that to their partner, I think from the partner's perspective, it is just really trying to understand that, again, it's not that they've kept this from you and tried to deceive you or betray you. It is they've protected themselves. And to just really try and have an open mind and go away and do that research and, try and understand what this means and whether it's something you can be part of fully, partially, or not at all. And the way I've often, when I've given people, not advice per se, but when they've asked for my perspective is, if you are in that situation, either as a crossdresser who's unhappy in their relationship or a partner who's unsure, where to go with this, if it is that you do end up not staying together, surely it's better to be miserable for a short time, after that break, than be miserable forever. And I think, going back to what you said, I do think there's a lot, not just for males who identify as male but cross-dressed. I think for women also, when, I'm an older millennial, and I definitely have got to a point in my life where I care less what people think than I ever did. I'm quite happy with who I am, almost that sort of to hell with it attitude. And I do think, it does come a point where, you just want to be you and whatever that looks like. But yeah, sometimes just same as you would be, even if it wasn't cross-dressing that was in the middle of all this. Some people just, they grow apart, they're not compatible in the first place, but I think for cross-dressers who are at that point where they want to maybe look at telling their partner, as Trish said, you have to be prepared to lose that person. But I would say to partners, yes, they are telling you this, they are prepared to lose you because of this, because they want to be happy, they don't want to be dishonest, they don't want to keep it hidden and for it to be a secret. And actually, it's, it's almost a privilege to be told that once you get past the feelings of deception and betrayal. If you're the first person or one of the only people they've ever told, that's a big, yes, it feels like a big responsibility, but also that's a big deal. They've trusted you with that. So yeah, I think go away, read, look at what it means. I mean, that's part of the reason why we started our site, because when when I first found out, and then when we were trying to navigate it as a couple, the things that were out there were quite seedy. A lot of sort of pornographic material, a lot of sort of people posting pictures of themselves, which there's absolutely nothing wrong with at all. But obviously when you're trying to find, the more emotional side, that was really difficult. And then we had the side where there were some cross-dressers saying they wear their partners or wives' clothes and they look better in them. Then you had some partners who wanted all cross-dressers banished off the face of the earth because, they were the devil sort of thing, because it was very extreme. And we really struggled to find any information that was honest, true, just this is our experience. And that was partly where Crossdress UK came into it, because we didn't want people to have to go through that torturous time of trying to find relevant, up-to-date, helpful information, really.
My social media has recently just blown up, and it came out of one post that came from a cross-dressing friend on Instagram. She kept asking me to, because I do these like memes or like micro stories with a photograph, and she wanted one that explored, mother-daughter dressing up relationship. I always kind of shied away from it because I was like, there's something little strange there that or at least I didn't understand. But when I got into the conversation with her about it, it became very clear that she desperately wanted to be a girl with her mum and to have that mother-daughter relationship that she never had. And what would it have looked like if mummy or mother had accepted, little boy Jimmy, we'll call him, and said it's okay to be a girl, Jimmy. Let's see what happens if you're a girl now, and just embrace that. And so I created this little video, and that video alone has gone way past 1 million views now. And I would say 9 out of 10 of the comments, probably even 95 out of 100, are, positive, amazing, hearts, fine, hearts, all of the emojis. And then the occasional, and it's always overnight, which tells me it's America, one word response of like freak, mental health, vomit. And it's so extraordinarily extreme. I'm like, it's just clothes. It's really just clothes. Like, kind of like, get a grip. Like, really seriously get a grip. It's just clothes. Now, I understand you have a reaction to it. Like, I can tell you now, my partner is glad that if this is my hobby, if you want to characterize it as a hobby, I know it's more than that, but let's just go with that for a moment. It's a much better hobby than, say, having a gun and going to the shooting range, or, deciding to restore an old Porsche that's going to bankrupt us in the process of doing it, and
Yeah.
I'll get obsessive about it. So it's really harmless. I think my advice to the women who are making the discovery is, like, just put yourself back into the first week of the relationship where you didn't know the person, and just play with it and have fun. Turn the lights off. Like, if you're really freaked by it, turn the lights off, and you'll discover that Harriet is actually still Harry, because you can't see Harriet. Okay, you might be able to sense some textures, but it really won't be anywhere as extreme as you may think it is. And the best piece of advice I was ever given from a close friend, who was actually the first person who allowed me to share Jenny with her in a sexual way. And it was an amazing experience with her. I was in a bad relationship, and I was talking to her about, what should I do? And even though I did choose to end up leaving that relationship ultimately, which, side note, I recently, this is 25 years ago, I discovered that that woman has now transitioned to become a man. I met him just a few months back, and it was a real, like, wow moment. So anyway, the advice I was given was, be careful what you throw away and why you throw it away. And I think that was probably the most prescient piece of advice about relationships I've ever heard, which is, none of us are perfect. We've all got flaws. There's always stuff. Whether it's, the one end infidelity or the other end, drifting apart. We've all got stuff, and to maintain a relationship is difficult. It requires hard work. But know that if you're going to throw it away, at least throw it away for a reason that's worth throwing it away. Like, it's a non-negotiable. And it's not just a kind of knee-jerk reaction to what is effectively a Halloween costume. It's fancy dress. It's cosplay. Call it cosplay if you want. Cosplaying in the bedroom. And as ridiculous as that sounds, I'm 100% certain that for some people, if you don't call it cross-dressing and you call it cosplaying, it will be okay. The way we perceive the world through language is extraordinary. It's no longer a strange behaviour. It's just something you do at Halloween.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And just going back to what you said sort of previously around mine and Harry's relationship, once we had decided and we'd got past the wearing about 10 different things at the same time because it was exciting, and we did introduce it into the bedroom, and we were very much like soft to start with, and we did, it wasn't all guns blazing. It was a very slow introduction, but it very much felt like we were at the beginning of our relationship again. And I don't know if there's many people that can say they've gone through that for a second time. And actually, I think that's what brought us closer together. On a more emotional level, I think it's everything we've kind of gone through this journey. But I think, as a couple and sort of, if you like, spicing things up, that definitely wouldn't have happened had he not told me about it. And it's very much like we were back in the beginning, and it was all exciting, and we were all giddy and happy to sort of come home from work and see each other, and that was lovely to be able to go down that path together. And yeah, it was good. And I think if you can get yourself to a place where you feel that you can try it, because you might find that actually, as you say, it's not a big deal. It's not the big deal that you think it might be.
I heard Esther Perel, who's an amazing, I don't know whether you know her work, but she's a, I don't know whether sexologist is the right way to describe her, but she does couples therapy and she does a lot of public speaking. And I heard her once say she's been married 3 times. It's just been to the same man. And, I think there's no, like, it's not a mystery that it was at year 8 that Harry told you, because it's the 7-year itch. It's that it's a 7 to 10 year cycle that relationships go through, and you have to almost recommit, rediscover, and fully embrace the new person that you're in a relationship with, and not the one that you met 7 or 8, 9 years ago. We're all very different, and that's the commitment we have to make. And I think in our society, it's very easy to just say, well, you're not the person I used to be with, so I'm out, because it's convenient. And that's usually quite catastrophic for everybody involved. Obviously, if there's kids involved as well. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
I've spoke to so few women who've read any of Jenny's books, so I know you have. Do you know which ones you've read? How many, and what was your experience? Lay it on thick for me, baby.
So I've read Finishing School for Girls, and what's the first book after that?
Initiation.
Yes. So I've read those 2, and let me tell you, yeah, very spicy, but it was a really refreshing read, because as I've mentioned before, I read all sorts, from the classics to the book talk favorites. And I'm used to reading things that are a little bit naughty and a little bit spicy, but I've never read anything like this, because it's just, I didn't even know it was a thing, and that just shows how close-minded you can be sometimes, isn't it? So yeah, so would you sort of call it trans erotica? Would you say that that's what it is?
I don't really know. I mean, again, it's my erotica.
Yeah.
And I think to put a label on it, like, if one of the questions I asked in the survey was, if a fairy godmother kind of waved a wand and made your life anything you would love it to be, I would choose to be, a 22-year-old gorgeous young lesbian who loves to make lesbian porn with a cohort of other very kinky lesbians, and maybe a trans woman thrown in there, for extra 6 inches. Again, we're getting a bit spicy now. But yeah, I would probably call it trans erotica. It's a very niche area, and it's very much about the tease and the edging and the build up, and very much about the visuals and the clothing and the colours and the textures and the fabric, and the being drenched in my description of femininity, what my perception of femininity is, which is it's a very thin veneer. I understand, I'm with Jermaine Greer that, femininity contains a very, very deep number of things, many of which, as a crossdresser, I don't ever have to handle, touch, or, feel the impact of. So it's not about being a woman. It's about the veneer of femininity as, as I've come to understand from from the senses: touch, smell, taste, all of them. And Jenny adores writing the books, and yeah, it's a super challenge to get through 2,000 words a day, because obviously it gets extremely exciting, shall we say.
I can absolutely see that. And I think I didn't go into reading the books with any expectation, because I never do, and obviously when it's not something, that you've sort of read before, you always think, oh, I'm maybe going to like this, I'm maybe not going to like this. And what struck me actually was the fact that I didn't feel any different to if I was reading sort of normal erotic stories. It just felt normal. It didn't feel like I was reading something that was like, oh, that's not for me. Yeah, it's a good book, but that's not for me. It still gave me that feeling of being, oh, that's a bit hot and spicy, you know. It still made me feel that sort of way. And I will say as well that I think the way you, Jenny, has written the books, it really does give that, it sets the scene. You really sort of, you're almost there when you know, describe the fabrics, describe what's going on, describe everything that's happening. It makes it feel very real. And interestingly, I read the book first and then listened to the audiobook. And I love reading and I get distracted quite easily if I listen to audiobooks. However, I do think that listening to the audiobook definitely changed it. I feel like that just set the scene even more, hearing Jenny's voice sort of bring that to life really. And you know, yeah, I definitely think that set the scene a little bit more. It's not something you'd want to come through the car if you were out and about through the speakers on Bluetooth, just as an FYI for anybody. Yeah, because it is a little bit spicy and people outside the car can hear what's going on inside the car if your phone is coming through the speaker. But yeah, no, I thought it was really well written, and it did surprise me the fact that although it is something that I'm obviously not a crossdresser myself, although I'm a partner of one, I've never really kind of explored whether that would be a hot thing, you know, but the story definitely did that for me. So
Amazing.
yeah.
Amazing. I mean, of course, Jenny fully endorses the idea of not just listening to it in the car, but opening the windows,
Yes,
and shocking the
absolutely.
world. Yeah, no, she'd totally be completely au fait with that. And one of the things, you know, that I wanted to do right from the get go with the books, particularly the audio books, was encourage people to dress for the experience, and because I wanted it to be an immersive. Like, I'm always frustrated with porn because it seems so extreme. And, you know, if your typical porn clip begins with, you know, a little bit of a tease, but crikey, do they get past the tease quickly? And then it kind of devolves into every hole as a goal, in you know, literally seconds. And for me, you know, I want to be in that moment of tease where it's all about the looks and the eyes and the smiles and the engagement and the light touch and what are they wearing and how are they holding themselves and what's the promise of what will happen. And for me, that's the essence of cross-dressing. It's the promise of how I will feel when I finally become Jenny, and what Jenny will be like. And she is demure and restrained, but at the same time completely outrageously flirtatiously slutty. And I just love all that heady mix of tease, tension, and, you know, edging is the word that in the, you know, in the sexual fraternities of this world, that would be a good description of it. It's like, how long can Jenny cause me and Jenny to be in this state of hyper feminine arousal before, you know, it's finally too much. And that's what I want to convey in the writing and the stories. So yeah, prepare to be teased.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, do you know what? From what you've just said, I think that's probably why as well it is so refreshing because, you know, when you look at porn or when you look at other erotic type books, you know what's going to happen. It's just, you can literally, before you've even read it or watched it, say, oh, well, let me guess, this is going to happen, and then this will happen, and then the end. Whereas I feel this was something different I've not experienced before, and actually, you know, the teasing side of it was very much a build up, and it built that excitement, whether it was something that, you know, you get aroused by or not. I think it was something, it's definitely something everybody should read or listen to because it gives that different perspective. Yeah, I can't wait to read more.
Yeah, I mean, and what's been fascinating in the journey of writing them is how a very small group of characters have dominated the books. Like, it's very, you could easily, I think what a lot of other authors do is they just invent a scenario and they create some characters for that scenario, whereas what I've, inevitably been drawn to is, here's a scenario, how can I put my characters into it? And there's, 4 or 5 primary characters. They're all real people I've had the privilege of over coffee saying, listen, I got to tell you something. And rather than kind of, raising an eyebrow and saying, check, please, they've grinned and leaned in and said, oh, tell me more. Have you got photos? Can I have a look in your box? And decided to come and play with Jenny. Maybe only once or twice. But I've had that privilege, which has been absolutely amazing. Well, tell us all about your site and your venture, and then I've got one last question for you, which I ask everybody.
Yeah, so obviously, as I've explained, Crossdressed UK was born out of feeling there was something missing for the cross-dressing community, for both cross-dressers and partners. We wanted to create a safe space for everybody with, we did the research, we did the reading, we spoke to so many different businesses and venues and everything. So what we could put on our site is up to date, it's relevant, and it's there for you. So you don't have to go doing the work that we struggled with in the beginning. It's grown a lot quicker than we imagined it would, to the point now where we've just recently met with a couple of the big charities over in America. Obviously, it's a very difficult political climate over there for anybody in the trans or cross-dressing community. We do have quite a few followers and community members that are from America, so we are looking at expanding and having resources and the appropriate things on there for people around the rest of the world, which is amazing. We are currently working with some big brands and some big names within the community as well, and looking at some collaborations. And we are, on Monday, we're going live with our what's called our premium hub. So on our site, we've got a confidence hub that's free for anybody to sign up to. It's got some resources. It's got, different fun moods. You can do quizzes, set goals. And then, we, as it is, this is our livelihood now. We run our own tech business, but this is really taken over. So I know there's been a couple of people that have been disappointed that we've decided to monetize. The fact is, we've not decided to monetize what is already there. We are doing something extra. So the site, the confidence hub, the standard one, and the resources and the news and everything we will keep updated will always be free at the point of access. So anyone who goes on the site, it will always be there. What we're offering is what somebody, what other people have asked for is something more. So that will be a monthly subscription, and it'll include, like a lot of places do, exclusive content, video content events, and, looking at things like exclusive member discounts. But that's for people who want to. Everything that is already there will stay there for everybody and anybody. But yeah, that's where we're at. So exciting times. Things have gone from 0 to 60 in a few short months, but yeah, we're in a really good place. We've met some amazing people. We spoke with people from all over the world, and yeah, we just want to keep doing what we're doing and keep helping people the way that people are saying we are helping, and just carry on doing what we do.
Amazing. Well, keep up the amazing work, and we'll check in regularly to see if we can help you on your journey. Okay, so my final question is, what advice would you offer? I asked this to everybody. What advice would you offer someone, and I think it's pertinent to our conversation, who's considering telling their partner tonight?
I would say make sure you're in the right sort of place and space for that. Don't do it in the middle of cooking dinner when the kids are running around as an offhand comment. Just sort of think about what you want to say and what you want that conversation to look like, and just be honest and be prepared for whatever comes next. However she reacts, listen, don't get defensive. I know it might hurt if her reaction isn't what you hoped it to be, but she's going to need that time, that realization and that time to process what's just happened. So yeah, if you're thinking of telling your partner, I think just being prepared for what might happen, and then making sure you're looking after you and she's looking after her and you're looking after each other as a couple, because the times ahead after the revelation can be rocky and can be tricky. And I think you both need to look after yourselves individually and be there for each other as a couple.
Thank you, Anna. It's been an amazing hour. And I just wanted to acknowledge your courage and thank you for sharing your wisdom with us and for inspiring us all to be better people, and particularly for those of us who may have the challenge of having a revelation in our lives, to be inspired by your massively open heart. And what an amazing conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, girls, for listening to my podcast. I really appreciate you listening all the way through to the end. If you've enjoyed what you've heard, then please consider going over to my website at jennyraven.com and join my mailing list. Then you'll get information about all of my very, very naughty things that I send out on a regular basis. You'll also get access to a couple of my free stories. You can either read them, or better still, you can experience them as an audio journey where I will directly encourage you to dress up for me in your favourite costume and do very, very, very unspeakably naughty things. I can't wait for you to send me photos of that experience with me, so please do join up at jennyraven.com.